guys to have this rally at MSG in the final stretch of the campaign.
Well, only Donald Trump could pull off something like that. I love the front page. I wish I'd brought one with me. The front page of the New York Post.
I saw that, yeah.
MAGA Square Garden, really, truly. 20,000 people inside, tens of thousands of people waiting outside. I mean, he blew the roof off the place like the Rolling Stones or something.
That this overt Nazi parallels that they are cultivating and this extremism will wake people up.
One of probably the most iconic act ever to play Madison Square Garden. And it's a way to kick off the final stretch. The last 8 days, it was fantastic.
This was a hate rally. This was not just a presidential rally. This was also not just a campaign rally. I think it's very important for people to understand that these are mini January 6th rallies.
So much excitement. It truly is a movement. Only Donald Trump could fill Madison Square Garden for a political event. It's the movement of MAGA.
It's a moment right now in our country where 1939 is knocking loudly on the door. And authoritarians always do the same thing. They tell you what they're going to do. They promise you retribution and revenge. You know, Donald Trump's statements right now, we just released an ad playing all of Donald Trump's statements in the original German, as we like to say. This guy's holding a rally tonight that is reminiscent of the American Bund movement in the 1930s, the American Nazi Party at Madison Square Garden.
She and her campaign are calling more than half of the country a bunch of Nazis, and yet she wants to be president and say that is offensive and it's belittling to what actually happened in Europe at the hands of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust that killed 6 million Jews. To make light of that by trying to score political points against your American opponent 3/4 of a century later is horribly offensive.
Top of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
Now, after nearly half a century, voters have had their rights restored on the question of abortion. If they like abortion, they can vote to legalize abortion. If they don't like abortion, they can vote to ban abortion. That's not shocking. That is how our system is supposed to work.
Now the Supreme Court has taken that guarantee away. Lester, this is the first time the Supreme Court has ever granted a constitutional right, which it did so when Roe was decided in 1973, and then took it away, a popular right that was widely recognized.
Not being a monarchy and all. So what's the argument against this? Well, there isn't one, really. And we know that for certain from the dissent in today's Supreme Court ruling. The 3 justices who objected don't even bother to make a legal argument in favor of keeping Roe v. Wade. Instead, they threw an embarrassing little tantrum.
Now, ever since that time, abortion has been a constitutional right. Now, this was a painful and humiliating experience for tens of millions of Americans who love this country. But the pro-life community never gave up on this country. We always believed that someday Roe versus Wade would be overturned, and this blot on our history would be purged. And today was that day.
Today starts an era of very, very, very big government, where it's the government that decides if you're going to have a baby or not, where it's the government that is in charge of your pregnancy. For women who have an unwanted, unplanned pregnancy, the nightmare is here. In many ways, though, it is also here now for any woman who wants a child, who wants to have a baby, and now. I mean, until today, this was an area of life in which we had some privacy to make our own decisions. Now, at least for now, in Republican-controlled states, it's the police. It's the state. Knock, knock.
This is not a surprise. The law, and that matters because it's the Supreme Court we're talking about, the law behind the Roe v. Wade decision of 1973 was so shoddy and ridiculous, because of course abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution, not even alluded to, that a lot of people figured out a long time ago that it would at some point be overturned because it was too absurd to continue.
Well, I have read many Supreme Court opinions that I have disagreed with, but whose legal scholarship I have respected. This is not one of those decisions. The current Supreme Court is not reflexively worthy of respect.
The White House is this country's 47th president. And for so many of you watching right now, that news is to say the least, a lot to digest. I understand that personally. After he lost 4 years ago, he refused to accept the outcome and incited a violent insurrection on our nation's capital. He's campaigned while facing criminal indictments related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 results, and he's run as a convicted felon. During this campaign, he has also promised to essentially be an authoritarian leader, to use power like no American president ever has before, and wield that power to go after his political enemies. This is a man who's also bragged about overturning Roe v. Wade and stripping away women's bodily autonomy. He's promised to conduct mass deportations to crack down on the rights of millions of Americans. Donald Trump is an anti-democratic force, but he's just been elected democratically.
That Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Deep frustration with the Biden administration, and former President Trump and the future President Trump overperformed in urban areas, particularly with men, proving that the strategy that they doubled and tripled down on over the course of the last few months absolutely succeeded and brought him back to the White House.
And he promises us that now he knows whom he wants to hire. Now he knows the kind of people he wants to have around him. A lot of people are saying that means a lot of very experienced people around Washington will be ruled out, and maybe they will. But it's going to be very interesting to see the kind of people he reaches out to and reaches out for in the days and weeks ahead as he.
And you've seen you can see the joy on all these people's faces. Think about the angst and the.
Evan Barker is a former Democratic campaign operative who quit the party and voted for Trump. So how are you processing the pardon, Evan?
I mean, I'm not afraid to say it, Jesse. Joe Biden is absolutely wrong. This is a gross abuse of presidential power. Makes it so profoundly wrong. On top of the fact that he's like the only person that's ever done this before, is the fact that he's been on tape lying about it repeatedly over the last year. And it's not exactly surprising to me either, though, given that the Democratic Party has a history of this. You know, they're known for being very hypocritical. I mean, just look.
Were you mad about what got Hunter in trouble in the first place? The bribery, the money laundering, the tax evasion? Because a lot of the Democrats never had a problem with any stuff about that. They just got mad that Joe made him look bad by lying that he wasn't going to pardon him.
The only major network that's been covering what Hunter Biden's been up to has been you guys, you know? So a lot of them just, it's like they don't even believe it. They still think it's some sort of right-wing conspiracy theory.
The biggest concern is Joe Biden's flip-flop on this. At one point, he said he would not pardon his son, and now, of course, he has done so. And I think that is probably where this feeling of betrayal comes from. But I also think you have to look at the fact that circumstances have changed since he made those statements. We've had Donald Trump, now elected president, and vowing to seek retribution against his political rivals. How better to get back at Joe Biden than to go after Hunter Biden? First, there are the charges, which I think most prosecutors would have exercised their discretion to decline to file these charges. The gun charge, the tax charge are not typically charges that would be filed by any U.S. attorney in the country. I think because of that change in circumstances, this was a prudent call. It was a decision that Joe Biden made to protect his son from going forward.
Yeah.
Unhinged claim, which his campaign has promoted, that immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets.
Eating dogs. Yeah.
Claims over whether migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eat people's pets.
The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
Though Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announced today he is sending state aid to the area because a surge of Haitian migrants is causing, quote, significant stress on its health and public safety.
You had one candidate that was completely unhinged, just completely off his rocker. He looked badly. He looked old. He looked disconnected from reality. He looked enraged. He kept repeating the same things over and over again. Made no sense. There was no preparation on his side. And he resorts to internet rumors already debunked just because he has nothing to say. One of the most the most ill-prepared presidential candidates we have ever seen in one of these debates. States.
There's no more grading Donald Trump on a curve. He wants to be president of the United States again. Yeah. Watch those 90 minutes last night and ask yourself which of those two people is more fit to be president.
And for anybody who is frustrated watching Donald Trump lie again and again unchecked, I will say that last night was validation, finally, watching him get called out. Not necessarily by the moderators, though they did make an attempt to try, although he talked over them and they didn't turn him off. But Kamala Harris was superb. She was elegant, she was classy, but she also was joyful, and then she also went right in there and baited him over and over and over
many people who actually dared to say the truth. It was the worst debate performance in history. And you had a lot of Trump supporters on Twitter, in the media, saying it was one of the worst debate performances they ever lost, they ever saw. And they could blame ABC all they wanted to. Blaming those two? You can't get past that?
No.
Seriously? I mean, is he that bad? He's going to take on dictators all over the world and can't handle the truth about eating cats in Springfield, Ohio? I mean, serious.
Right out of the...
Former President Trump and Vice President Harris's campaign are already talking about a second debate. Harris's team says the VP is entertaining all offers. Trump says he did so well in the first, he may not need a second.
We had a great night last night.
The first one featured Trump's criticism of Vice President Harris's policy flip-flops.
She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run.
And complaints about the two moderators. They fact-checked Trump about abortion and crime data and let Harris slide when she said there are no American troops in combat zones.
It was 3-1. It was a rigged deal.